Recording. Okay. Good evening, everyone, again. Thank you for joining us. This is the August 14th meeting of the NSA Ad Hoc. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for being on time. I appreciate you all being here. And I wanted to start us off by with the agenda that's on the screen right now. We are here for an hour and a half. We wanted to start off with checking in, determining who might take some notes, a little bit of information sharing about where we are and what we did last week, and then to launch into our discussion today about modifications to the discipline matrix, and then hopefully introduce next week's topic at the end. One of the things that I hope that we all keep in mind are, one, the agreements, the agreements that we had and were sort of discussed and talked about and put together by Nikki to send us forward to, and she sent to us. I'll just put them up on the screen one more time so that we have a good memory or that we remember them. Thank you for taking the time to go over those agreements. We also have the most recent monitors report, which I hope we all have some familiarity with. I hope that we can work our way through this agenda. Let's see. Tefar, are you taking notes? Is that you in the document? I think it is. Chair?
Yes, I see the chats here, so I have been utilized.
Gotcha. Thank you. I was hoping that we might take just a few minutes to sort of ask ourselves or sort of say out loud this one question that we have as our check-in, which is one thing the community needs to feel confident in OPD post NSA. One thing the community needs to feel confident in OPD post NSA. Of course, this is not just for community members, not just for commissioners, but also for our department members who are here. While you think about that for just a moment, I'm just renaming people. Does anybody want to start? Mariano.
Yeah, what comes to mind immediately for me is objective oversight, which to me means, non-biased and transparent.
Thank you. Thank you for being first. Anybody else? Otherwise, I'll just start going down my screen or list or grid. I will go next just to give people a little bit more time. For me, I think that one thing the community needs to feel confident in OPD post NSA is transparency in the way that they are sort of applying discipline and enforcing accountability. I'm going to go next to Lieutenant Kalanch. What do you got for us?
Good evening, sir. My first instinct, I'll just go with it because I didn't have time to overthink this, but I feel like we probably need a permanent chief before we can feel confident in at least the medium-term future of the department.
Good point. Well, thank you. Gonna go now to Nikki Din.
It's a pretty big question, but I think in terms of the NSA, I think it's some type of, maybe this is what you were getting at, Jesse, some type of transparency around the same issues around the NSA that the NSA oversight is currently looking at. So that it just can't be like a clean cut, NSA's over and oversight's over, and we never talk about those things again. I think there will be some want from the public to still hear about and have transparency around how those issues are continuing to improve or play out in OPD.
Very good point. Thank you. How about, let's see. Jose Dorado?
Bueno noches todos. Yeah, I tend to see everything with a community policing lens, so I'm kind of biased. And specifically, I think that the thing that the community needs to feel confident in OPD is to have the infrastructure starting at the block level and going to the neighborhood and the citywide level, an infrastructure composed of neighborhood councils and block organizations, supported and trained by OPD and the city to operate as block organizations and neighborhood councils. And part and parcel of the community policing is that there be a real role for the community resource officer as well as the neighborhood services coordinators, but more so the CRO in collaboration with the neighborhood councils and the block organizations. I think that infrastructure is the key, as I've always said, to getting a handle on crime in Oakland, as well as raising quality of life. So that infrastructure operational with a real buy-in by OPD will go a long way toward the community feeling confident in OPD.
Thank you. Next, I have Lieutenant Hubbard.
Thank you. Along the same lines of what Commissioner Dorado said, just keeping the stakeholders with our partnerships with stakeholders, similar to what we're doing this evening. A lot of great policy and practice have come up from that.
Thank you. Reggie Lyles.
I would think that the community, and I would hope the police department, would have a commitment to cultural change, to become an honest, ethical, and constitutionally driven policing agency where officers are held accountable and as they fight crime and protect the public. Let me say it again. Community and police department becomes an honest, ethical, and constitutional law-driven policing agency where their officers are held accountable and as they fight crime and protect the public. Maybe you can take that "and" out there, accountable as they. Yes, yes.
Thank you. Next, I have Chair. She's still eating, so maybe you'll give it to us in the chat. Why don't we just move forward? Sorry to catch you. Thank you all. Appreciate it. I know that this is obviously it's sprung upon you. It's meant to do that so that to get your initial thoughts. But I think that each one of us comes with a perspective that is really important and with great ideas, and hope we can continue doing this and for each meeting. So moving along in our agenda, just a quick recap of last week. Last week, we presented the 3 different topics for us to focus on, which were chosen and what we'll be focusing on for the coming weeks. The first one was acknowledging bad past and bad past practices. There's a lot of P's in there, sorry. And we had a discussion about what it is, how exactly that topic changes culture, how or what the department might do to implement this topic, and what sources or experts we thought we needed to bring to the table to present. We talked a little bit about sort of getting officers to acknowledge and to be trained on the different misconduct and scandals that have been happening in the past, sort of training new officers, training all officers at every different ranks, what that looks like. We also talked about having that information tested upon for promotional or lateral movements to out of patrol assignments, and how we might do that. Lieutenant Hubbard gave us some information about what OPD is currently doing, training on the NSA, the members that are brought in, and we talked a little bit about what that might expand to, and how this particular plan might be implemented. Now that I am out of trial and have a little bit more time, I will try to synthesize those thoughts and sort of develop an action plan or some sort of list of recommendations that we can bring forth and bring back to you. I don't have that this week. I apologize. I should have more time coming up this coming weekend, this weekend. Questions, thoughts, things to add? Chair gave us an update about what her response to part 1, which is an independent police commission. Thank you for that. All right. Well, if nothing else about our recap and the topics presented, why don't we start with today's topic, this week's topic? And one of the things that Mr. Lyles, Reggie, and I went over 2 weeks ago and chose as one of the topics of what this committee should focus on, what this committee should talk about, what recommendations to bring forth, and what experts or ideas we need to leverage in order to get there. So this in particular is a discussion about the discipline matrix. I sent last week an attachment that included both the manual of rules, the discipline policy, as well as the discipline matrix. All of those 3 things are interconnected. They all sort of provide both the rules that must be followed, the manner in which discipline should be doled out or decided, and the recommended ranges, and how exactly those ranges work, and the possible deviations from those particular ranges. And so I hope that we have a discussion about these 3 questions that are here in front of you. First one is, how does this topic change culture? How or what might the department do to implement this topic? And what sources or experts do we need to bring to the table at present? Now, this is not meant to be a answer 1, answer 2, and answer 3. Of course, we can just sort of have some thoughts anyone can answer any one of these because we all have great ideas, maybe at different points or about all of it, and then just have a discussion about it. Pausing to give anyone an opportunity to jump in before I ask questions that might get to sort these things. Why don't we start with Reggie? Could you talk about why this was one of the topics that you and I sort of set upon and decided was important?
You talk about the discipline matrix.
Correct.
Okay. From my experience in paying attention to OPD, and I'm talking about crisis issues, not the everyday tick-tock of services and activities that they do, but just the crisis issues that become newsworthy and becomes issues of lawsuits and trials and civil trials and even criminal trials, where officers are involved around their behavior. So it seems to me that the way the discipline is set, and the way it is reviewed and understood, and this is culturally, how it's culturally understood, is that if someone is involved in some wrongdoing, that the weight of the department unofficially does everything it can to make sure that the officer is not held accountable. Now, I understand Government Code 3300. I understand the Bill of Rights for police officers, and I respect that. I'm not talking against that. What I'm saying is that it seems that the way the matrix is understood and the way it's constructed, it leaves big gaps where people who have done wrong can find ways for technicalities to not to be held accountable. That is horrible. And then you have in black and white from judges, federal judges, saying the same thing. This is not, somebody who's from SDS or somebody who is, some revolutionary department making these comments. This is coming from sitting judges. So that to me speaks to the non-professionalism that the Oakland Police Department has to face, that they are in, because what makes a discipline a profession is when a discipline or is setting its own rules and holding its own people accountable to those values and ethical rules. It seems like, these are paraphrasing from Judge Orrick and Judge Thelton Henderson, that OPD uses the weight of its influence to not to be held accountable. Now that's hard to hear if you are in law enforcement, because we like to think of ourselves of the ones who follow the law. But it gets real cloudy, and it even, and obviously in Oakland, it's broken down. And we can say it's broken down because a series of crisis events, and I don't want to go through all of them because, folks don't like to hear those names, but there's series of events that are recently and go back decades, series of events that OPD shouldn't have never done if they're sworn to protect and serve the public. And then then again, you have sitting federal judge and the judge who is overseeing this NSA agreement, who said it himself, that it seems like the emphasis on the department is not to hold people accountable, not to hold people to adhere to their own rules. They cannot discipline their own people. Then you're not a profession.
Can I,
And that's not an insult, that's just facts.
can I ask a question then? So what I heard you say was that officers escape accountability, as opposed to officers are not being disciplined enough, right? That they're escaping accountability of some way. They are finding loopholes, or they're finding or their conduct sort of slips in between MORs, or not necessarily that the punishments are too light.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
No, I'm saying, although that may be a part of it, but it's a small part of it.
Which part?
The lion's share, well, the fact that officers are escaping accountability. I'm not saying, and I don't think what I've read from Judge Orrick, he's not saying that either. What he's saying is the people who should be holding them accountable are opening doors, or incapable of doing the work that's necessary to make sure their rank and file, not only rank and file, rank and file are held accountable all up and down the line, not just the line officers, sergeants, lieutenants, captains, deputy chiefs have to be held accountable, and they have to be held to their own rules and regulations. Now, the matrix part of it is that they are written in a way where there are, gaps where people can say, well, he really didn't do that. He really didn't mean, did he really mean that? We're not sure. We're not sure. So according to what we've written here, that person is not held accountable. Now I get into, when I'm trying to explain this, I got to use examples. In my head, I want to say, well, give them an example. Giving them an example. Now, this is where it gets, it's hard to take. There's no way that you can have an officer in charge of investigations using reliable informants and influencing them with their own money to testify in court proceedings, that people are held accountable and then are convicted on that kind of false testimony or tainted testimony. For over a decade or more, and nobody in the department not recognizing that and standing up and saying, hey, this is wrong. What he's doing is wrong. Where's the supervisor in those cases who supervised that person? And then and then when he comes under scrutiny, when he comes under investigation, he's found to be not held, well, he didn't do nothing wrong. He's relieved from being held accountable for malfeasance. Wait a minute. He used money to pay people to give testimony where other folks went to jail for 10 years. This is how I understand the most recent case. But I can give you other cases that the public thinks have occurred. And all of them are horrible cases. And then we have the 23-year consent decree. Well, that's because there was dozens and dozens and dozens of victims who were saying, the folks, these night riders are abusing people. That brought about the NSA agreement. And then you have 23 years of saying, we're not going to adhere to it. We're going to adhere to some of it, but we're not going to do all of it. When you put that all together, you have a situation where folks are not being held accountable to the ethical behavior of a police agency. We don't have these kind of things in all of the policing in California or all of the policing in the United States, but we do have a plethora here in Oakland. Now, if folks don't understand what I'm saying, then you haven't been following, current events.
I do have some questions about it. I think I do understand what you're saying, but I wonder if sort of what comes from that, right? Because we're talking about the discipline matrix here, which generally sets out recommendations for punishment and discipline across violations. And we're talking about modifications to that particular matrix, which generally accepts that liability is found or that someone should be disciplined, as opposed to what seems you're describing, which is escaping that accountability, not even having a sustained finding, right? And so I want to, that's why I want to sort of clarify, are we talking about sort of maybe expanding the MORs? Are we talking about sort of the contours of the discipline policy, or are we talking about changing the matrix, meaning increasing, decreasing discipline, or modifying in some way?
See, Jesse, to me, that is too heavy transactional. Let me give you an example about the matrix. Body-worn camera, turning the camera off. Okay, we in the ad hoc about the body-worn camera, when it was debated about, well, why are they allowed to turn the body-worn camera off and still have a job? If they're supposed to keep that camera on, why do they get to turn it off 2 or 3 times before some discipline comes down? We actually had that debate in the ad hoc committee with sitting police agents like we have here now participating. One of them asked me, well, you wouldn't want somebody fired just because they turned the camera off one time. My response was, yes, it depends on the circumstance. If he turned it off one time and somebody died, yeah, he should be fired, should be prosecuted. But that's the attitude. That's the attitude, and that's built in to the policy where you have, for lack of a better explanation, a second bite at the apple or a third bite at the apple when someone's doing something wrong. I'll give you another one. Let's say you have an officer who falsifies on a police report, lies. I'm not going to call it falsification. I'm going to say it said John Smith did blah, 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 and he's lying. And we find out that the person is lying. That person ought to be terminated in my professional way of looking at law enforcement.
I think I get it.
You get it now? No. Well, he only lied one time. He lied one time. We'll give him 3 days off. We'll give him 5 days off.
So I think it sounds like sort of progressive discipline is something you do not favor. There shouldn't be progressive discipline.
I was in law enforcement when progressive discipline came in. Prior to progressive discipline, it didn't exist. But I was in the business when it came in. I fought for progressive discipline. But I'm not going to give anybody progressive discipline if they're paying off witnesses to give testimony in a criminal trial. That guy don't get progressive discipline. I'm not going to give progressive discipline to someone who lied on a police report And because he lied on the police report, it involved an arrest where somebody was shot and should not have been shot. Involved in officer involved shooting, and maybe they survived it or not, or maybe they didn't survive it. I don't think they get progressive discipline on that. So here's where the non-policing individual may not get the severity of the action of individual officers. The action of an individual officer may look benign, but it may end up in a death. If their benign action ended up in a death, then that benign action is no longer benign. It's felonious. And the book should be thrown at them. Progressive discipline action, if a guy is rude to people, if a guy is a little too rough with folks, if a guy have too many 148 arrests, and you talk to him, counsel him, blah, 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 write him up. I get all of that. That's progressive discipline action. I'm talking about when we have severe action that has been hovering around the Oakland Police Department like so many flies at a horse ranch. I mean, we got case after case after case after case after case of some of the ugliest things that what is amazing to me is how everybody can ignore, well, that happened 3 years ago. Well, that happened 2 years ago. Well, that happened 5 years ago. But we have a litany of things that keep happening from new officers. New officers come in, they understand the culture. Nothing's going to happen to you if you do this. So they say, okay. That to me is where the rubber meets the road. So it's not just saying, if you run a red light and an accident comes about, you get 2 days off for running the red siren on, or you did it recklessly went through the and blah, blah. So because we find you at fault, we're going to give you 1 day off. You've never done that before. So that's progressive discipline action. That's not the issues that are affecting our community and the Oakland Police Department. The issues that affect the Oakland Police Department is the belief that they're not ethical, that they're not constitutional in their application of the law, and that they're dishonest. They're not being honest. So if an officer is lying, that officer, the book should be thrown out that officer. I hope I made myself clear.
Crystal.
Thank you.
Mariana.
Yeah, I think you have, Reggie. Also, what this, in terms of the NSA and the task, I think that's why we have, extension of the NSA, non-compliance, and it all seems to, blow up as a crisis, which it is. They're crises, because if you have, officers escaping discipline, or there's light discipline, that means that there's no violation, and that means that there's compliance, and that means that there's sustainability. So, we can't, as an NSA ad hoc, we cannot go down that road where we, just only look at, we're going to put some nice words together where there's going to be discipline for this infraction. But if there's no accountability or institution of that discipline, then it's going to continue. And because it's going to be escaped, it's going to be light, which no violation, which means compliance. And then what we're going to have is, boom, another crisis because something hit, something major, the media picked up on it. And so This is what I get from this conversation, from this narrative that Reggie just gave, and I gotta see it, take it back to our task here, which is, how do we set policy where, there's sustainability after NSA? Thank you.
Mariano, it looks like you raised your hand again. I might, okay.
Could I interject one thing? I see something that's written on the matrix, and I think we ought to not just say officer, we should say officer and staff officers. So the department understands that we're not just talking about people who are below the rank of sergeants, that we're talking about captains and lieutenants and deputy chiefs and chiefs, everybody. Because I know that's one of the issues of the officers, think that only they get disciplined and no one else in the department does, meaning sergeant and above.
Thank you. Nikki?
I want to offer some resources for the table. When I was part of the Reimagine Task Force, some of these issues have come up, and some of the issues Reginald just brought up was really present in those conversations as well, particularly the team that did police culture and organization work. And so one of the things I wanted to bring up was there was discussion in 2020 around the Hillard report. And here's the link to the Hillard report plus OPD's response to it. And so when we were asked to consider OPD issues, we were also asked to consider the findings of this report, which share that statistically, when they looked at 2014 through 2018, Black officers were on average 37% more likely to have an investigated complaint of misconduct sustained against them than officers of other races. So I put it out there for us to just digest, and folks on this committee can read it and kind of see where it has gone. If the officers here, lieutenants here, have an update on this report or what has come out of it so far, maybe some of it is reflected in the disciplinary matrix that has been updated in 2022. It looks like they could shed some light on that, but I just want us to keep in mind too, like when we ask for changes in discipline, we should keep in mind that sometimes when folks write rules like this and enact it, it still plays out the way it plays out in communities. Suddenly, Black officers are the ones that are being the ones punished more than white officers, maybe even other races. The other resource I'd like to share is, I'm just going to keep my eyes on the Reimagine Task Force report, and I just put that as well. The Reimagine Task Force report has a lot of recommendations in it around discipline, and I'm going to just share like the 4 that I pulled up so you guys can, as a way to like consider looking at it. And some of these are like tier 1 recommendations, which means they were really like, everybody felt like these were the top recommendations to consider. And the numbers aren't in like priority, they're just like in the numbers that we put them in. So they're not like the ones that are most prioritized. I would say, I think in this set, recommendation 105 and 143 might be one of the more prioritized and recommendations. And those say impose discipline on OPD managers and supervisors for discriminatory policing. So there's some ideas on how to do that once you get into that recommendation more. And then there's also a recommendation to amend city charter to designate the police commission as the final adjudicator on police officer discipline. Those 2 stick out to mind, and I think it speaks a little bit to Reginald's like idea of like, it's the internal discipline is not working. Sometimes it's not even catching in the first place. So having a different entity like the police commission to be the final adjudicator helps with arbitration, but might help with something like what Reginald was describing as well. If you want to do something like that, there is a robust process. They laid it out here. You have to change city charter. So it has to go into like the ballots, which is happening in November already. So I think the ship might have sailed, but that's something to consider that the community has already thought of and worked on a year and a half ago. The other recommendations, recommendation 22, is about updating the promotion process for Oakland officers. And this includes making sure that their discipline history is revealed over the entire year, not just 5 years back as it was when we looked at this. And then recommendation 32 is about updating the manual of rules and discipline. And there's a little bit more details on that in the document in here. It might not be in the ones that aren't in the appendix. You can still find the link to the original document that folks put together, so you can see the step-by-step recommendations that they put in there. I'm bringing this back in because there has been a lot of thought in this and a community process that has brought about some thinking about this that we can build off of, and we don't have to start from scratch.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing those resources to bear and reminding us about these things. I wanted to just bring up the recommendation 32, which focuses a bit on the topic that we have today, which is the manual of the discipline matrix, the modifications, and sort of have on the screen just for a little bit some of the recommendations that were made by the Reimagining Task Force.
This document here, Nikki, is a public document, right? And it was sent to all of us?
I'm not sure if this was sent to everyone. It was.
I'd like to have it. I'd really like to spend a week or two going through it.
Yeah,
I
it's
just put the link into the chat for this page specifically, and then Nikki put the entire report about a few minutes ago.
if you go into chat, you'll see it, and I'll be happy to email out this group again with all the links.
I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
And you can see to the bottom of every recommendation, there's the contact information from the community person who helped put together that particular recommendation. So this was Christina Peterson.
Jose?
Yeah, I'm really glad that Nikki brought this up because there was hundreds of people involved in this whole process. And they probably devoted, who knows how, untold thousands of hours. This was just such a huge effort. And there's just so much in the report. And I'm not saying I'm anywhere near an expert, but I think it behooves all of us to spend some time going through this report and really absorbing all the thoughts and perspectives of all the people that are involved. This is really it would be such a crime for this to sit on the shelf gathering dust, like so many other studies have done. Anyhow, I just wanted to say I'm glad Nikki brought that up, because this is really a prime subject for study in any discussion around OPD, and certainly around reforms. And there's aspects of it that directly relate to discipline, what we're talking about tonight. So thank you for bringing it up, Nikki.
The one that's currently on the screen are the working group's recommendations. And I was scrolling through, as I recall saying this, to the portion that focuses on the discipline matrix. I know that we are working on a rather fast clip. This is information that we are all getting, that we're all sort of seeing, some for the first time, some remembering that we saw this from before. And I'll just continue scrolling through to talk so that everyone has an opportunity and has it on screen.
Jesse, as you're doing that, if I can just make some comment,
Please.
I agree that, the Reimagined Public Safety Task Force and their subcommittees put some really good documents together. They did a lot of research and some really good recommendations came out of them. But unfortunately, I have to agree with Jose Dorado. They are collecting dust. This process, went, I don't know, almost 9 months. And, the recommendations went to the city council and, some of the first tier, second tier, were approved. And, you only see snippets of some of those recommendations being implemented. One of them being the internal affairs, being handed over to CIPRA. There's a few others, that involve youth services, but, I just have to state that because I think both Nikki and I felt that, there wasn't a full partnership with those city council people that, that implemented this. There was a lot of due diligence, but it just was not any the follow-up that we expected. But so that, that leaves it up to us to make sure that doesn't happen. Let's use this research and this documentation and see if we can give it some wings. Thank you.
Jesse, may I add one other thing along with Mariano, what Mariano's saying? Stone Turn, I believe that's the name of the organization.
Yep.
They got people out here right now discussing the disparity between the discipline on African-American Latino officers vis-a-vis white officers. They're doing something right now, right this moment. And they're interviewing people right this moment. There's a, I think the guy name is Jack Donahue out of New York City is out doing something right this very moment. He and another woman by the name of Linda Mamara. So, so what they're doing is what is replicating what's already been done. And then we have the Jennifer Eberhardt study that said the same thing. So what I'm coming to the conclusion is that Oakland Police Department has an amazing ability to ignore what it's being critiqued about. They have a almost a bulletproof ability to dismiss any critique of their professionalism and act as if it never happened. That's culture.
So I'm reading from this particular document, but I'm also hearing hearing the words that are being said, and I'm kind of seeing some general areas of recommendations or changes that we might be focusing on for modifications to the discipline matrix. One of them might be the manner of discipline. One of them might be adding additional things into the discipline matrix to cover, let's call them loopholes or accountability gaps. One of those things might be one of those things might be sort of taking or not having progressive discipline, or having a much more severe first step discipline. I'm not sure exactly what it is for a certain class of misconduct, which, for lack of a better term, officers ought to know better, right? And especially those dealing with misconduct, those dealing with harm to community members. That is, I think that's kind of what I'm hearing so far. And I think those are great ideas to work with and figure out how they might be implemented. So I wonder, I suppose one of the questions I have is, with respect to the accountability piece, so the discussion about sort of when officers escape accountability, or when we are post NSA and we're worried about whether or not this discipline will actually get meted out. How do we, and how does the department implement those changes or make sure that those things happen?
What is it, Reggie, that you always say? What happens in a locker room, and the discussion about, well, I can't do this anymore because it's going to affect my pay, so that, I don't know how to say this, but, implement discipline. If there's a violation, if there's a misconduct, and the discipline matrix says, this level of violation requires, 2 weeks off without pay, whatever it may be, A, B, and C, and then that has to be implemented. That has to be done. I don't know, how do we do that? It could be on paper, but, if during the process of, investigation, or did this officer really do this, or they didn't, and all of a sudden it turns out that, well, maybe they didn't do this, and so, if there's a violation, or someone's charged with something, or, then, it needs to be followed through. I don't know how to say that, but it's, if my daughters, if we told them, you can't go out the front yard, without asking permission, or else, you're not going to be able to go out with your friends for a week. And they do that, well, then guess what? They didn't go out with their friends for a week. And there wasn't any room for any, fudging or escaping or making it lighter. That's what this accountability should be. Thank you.
Jose?
Yeah, one aspect that I don't know that we've dealt with or dwelled on is that if in fact there's a violation of policy deserving of discipline, however it is, and whatever the final discipline turns out to be, and I don't quite know how it would fit in, but I think it should. All those, I would think, all those that should have known, that were aware of the violation and said nothing, there should be discipline accorded them as well, not just the person that violated policy. But if in fact there are peers, let's just say it was just a regular officer, if that regular officer violated a policy in some sort of way and was disciplined, then I would recommend that the investigation include those people that should have known of the violation and said or did nothing, that there should be discipline accorded to them as well. And also, and related to that, and again, I don't know quite how this would fit, but a safe place, for lack of a better word, a safe place for officers to call out misconduct without doing it safely so that there's not any retribution or reaction by others to their calling out misconduct. There should be a place where honest officers can, without any reservations, call out misconduct of their peers or their superiors. And there should be a safe place where they can go and do this. Again, I mentioned it before that if that hadn't happened in a case of the rookie officer, we would have never known, or who knows when we would have found out about the writers. So there has to be I think a built-in safe place that happens. Thanks.
Well, we have the infamous case of the news reporter who was shot downtown Oakland using a less than lethal shotgun in Oakland. I don't think the person who did the shot was an Oakland officer. It was a mutual aid situation. But they interviewed Oakland officers and they all said they didn't hear anything. Now think about that. You're on Broadway. You're in that echo. It's a canyon. It's a great canyon. Shotgun blast goes off. Bang. Nobody saw anything. And then they go and get the videos from the stores from across the street, and they can see everybody turn around and look at the person who actually was holding the shotgun. So then they wanted to discipline all of them. It was 23, 24 officers. But that discipline was all wiped away. And they all came in to their oral interviews, IAD, and said, I was looking the other way. I didn't see anything. I don't know who held the shotgun. I get it. I understand no one wants to be the snitch. But now that you've been sworn in and you're on tape, you're supposed to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So that's a classic example. That's a classic example. Over 20-something OPD officers said they didn't see anything. Of course, the reporter was shot in the side of the head and ended up in the hospital, almost died from the less than lethal baton shot, but he survived it, thank God. But all of them got their jobs back. This is what we're talking about.
Could I ask of our two department liaisons here a question about affirmative reporting requirements in the MOR and what the current discipline is, and if such a finding were sustained, if you know.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So there's two categories. There's class 1 and class 2. Class 1 is mandatory reporting. So if I witness a class 1 violation, which is the most severe, I'll just use an example we talked about earlier about excessive force, and the department finds that I failed to report that within a certain time frame, then I am susceptible to discipline. And excuse me, I'm not looking at the matrix right now to tell you what that is, but it's a failure to report category. Class 2 is another category, and those are considered self-discovered. So as let's say a lieutenant, one of my staff members shows up late, that's considered a class 2 violation, and I can handle that formally, but through training and depending on the circumstance, rehabilitation. And to answer a previous comment or question, in all of our investigations, there's a section within that investigation that requires the investigator to identify if any employee could have or should have known of the misconduct and withheld it. So it requires them to proactively look for evidence of withholding information, as in this employee saw this, they should have come forward, they did not. we hold them accountable, and that's from the bottom all the way up to the top. So it's every employee.
Are there, I think I have the portions of the discipline matrix that relate specifically to that at the top there. I think it looks like reporting violations and confidential reporting of misconduct may or may not be the same. So just help us out a little bit for the reporting violations, failure to report misconduct when required. It doesn't seem to make that distinguish between class 1 and class 2. How do we know, or how do we tell?
So that's in a policy. I can pull it up and send it to you, but it's in a separate policy that defines those two things. Reporting misconduct, I know that is general, and this is, I think, goes to why this should be updated, because this definitely matrix is antiquated. But there could be a pattern of misconduct that I also failed to report. So it's interesting if you have, let's say I say, oh, I know this employee shows up late every single day. Well, that's a pattern. And then my failure to report that simple class 2 violation can then be a class 1 violation for me not recognizing this pattern. So that's why the range is a bit strange when you look at this. But our discipline policy, or our internal affairs policy, defines that it's called M3, what a class 1 and class 2 is.
Lieutenant Galanch.
Thank you, sir. I should also just note that this discipline matrix as a standalone. Sorry,
That was me.
the discipline matrix as a standalone document is an incomplete picture. And even if you do a 1-for-1 comparison of all these listings here in the discipline matrix to the actual manual of rules, the MOR, you'll note that some of these do not appear in the MOR. They are sort of subcategories of things that do appear in the MOR. This document that you're looking at here, the discipline matrix, is an appendix. As you can see in the title of the tab there, it's an appendix to the overall training bulletin, TB, Victor Tom VT, or maybe 5T, Roman numeral 5T, which is a really large compendium of our internal affairs investigative procedures and policies that, as a tome, sort of encompasses many of the questions that you might have. So for reporting violations, failure to report misconduct when required, there's a corresponding policy entry for what types of violations are required, which then links back to the MOR, which may or may not be a robust description of that same thing, which then links back to the discipline matrix. So there's a lot of cross-referencing that occurs in any internal affairs investigation or ascertaining discipline for a sustained violation to sort of come to all those findings.
I'm sorry. So there's another document that, so I sent out 3 documents, the MOR, the discipline policy, and a discipline matrix appendix. But it sounds like there is a third or another document, perhaps is an internal affairs specific document that sort of sets out what you see in the appendix.
Yes. So this, you see the VT there, index number VT. This is a larger sort of compendium of policies, which combined addresses myriad facets of internal affairs investigations. So there's it's quite large.
Then that larger compendium, is that available on the website where all the policies are, or is that something that is an internal document?
I believe it's available. I don't access the public facing website very often to look for our policies, but I can double check that for you.
Much appreciated. And then I want to follow up one more time on also on the question of whether there is some sort of safe or confidential reporting channel for officers who do see misconduct, and in the event that, how does that sort of play out in the investigative process, the IA process, if they end up needing to be witnesses or not be witnesses?
Brian, do you want to take that or no?
I think we'll say the same thing. We, as an organization, encourage even anonymous complaints, and there's many avenues to do that. We certainly get the employee who approaches supervisors and want to remain anonymous, and we as supervisors need to accept that complaint and file it as anonymous, and all complaints are investigated. But also they also have the ability to write an email, make a phone call to internal affairs, and it is regardless if they're anonymous, it's investigated and followed through.
A phone call or an email or going to the supervisor may necessarily identify who the person is. Is there something that is even more anonymous? Like an anonymous served form that can be filled out? I'm thinking about sort of lowering those barriers of reporting. And, you know, a phone call, someone might recognize the voice. If you send an email, it has your name on it.
I guess I'm not sure. I have to look at the city website. If I can file something electronically that allows me to be anonymous, I would assume as such. I've been on the other end of just as supervising, just received a lot of anonymous complaints, and I never, I guess, ran into the issue of someone being worried about being anonymous. They usually send it in a not a city email. They send it via a personal where their name is not included. I've also received just on landline anonymous where the employee doesn't want to mention their name. But I understand what you're saying. If we can do a better job allowing people to feel more comfortable.
Thank you, Mariano.
Yeah, the question that arises in this conversation is, why does it have to be anonymous? You know, feeling comfortable and feeling afraid are two different things, you know. And so my question is there in this matrix a retaliation violation? If I raise something and then I get my butt kicked or I get disciplined for something, I lose, you know, some time or whatever, that's retaliation. Is that a violation? And is that in there somewhere? And that's the question.
It is. Thank you for that. And I agree. One should not be afraid to make a complaint and name themselves in the complaint, even with providing, as you'll soon see, the MOR violation. And we take retaliation extremely seriously. And that in itself would be an independent investigation. But we condemn it, obviously. But even then, people just have it within them. It's, yeah, as you see there, it's an automatic termination. There's no progressive discipline there. But yeah, you know, people just at the end of the day, they don't trust the system, whatever it may be. So they just want to remain anonymous.
Can you address institutional retaliation, you know, where there's no butt kicking, there's no, you know, cutting of hours, there's no, you know, anything tangible, but there's institutional retaliation where, you know, this officer or those officers are, you know, because of the culture that exists in the police department, you know, there's that, you know, unspoken retaliation, you know, and maybe in 6 months or maybe a year and a half, you know, that officer, you know, does not get promoted, is constantly, you know, staying, you know, in the same position. You know, I'm talking about institutional retaliation. If I make myself clear, how do you address that? You know, where you know, you can't really pinpoint it, so then it's not really a violation, but, you know, because of the culture, it exists.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Very coincidental to a training I just completed. The city attorney is reviewing it now. but I just created training on institutionalized, as you describe, retaliation things, implicit things like involuntary transfers and lack of promotion because of coming forward and saying something. And I'll gladly share that with you once the city attorney approves it. But one of the things, the only way I can really answer that is on top of just condemning it, it doesn't make its way into decision-making for promotions or transfers. So when one wants to transfer to a new unit or looking at promotion, one thing that does not make it is whether that employee filed any complaints against someone else or stepped forward to report misconduct. In fact, if someone did step forward to report misconduct, that would actually fall into the praise category, would be encouragement for them to be transferred to a position that they would like or promotion. So it really kind of flipped the script of more praising than it is discipline. But at the end of the day, we're trying to remove that implicit bias also. And by us just coming out with more training on why it won't be tolerated and why one commander or supervisor can't take that into consideration is essential.
Thank you.
I'm looking at the time and it's 7:15. So I think that I will bring back up where we are at with the discussion and sort of give anyone who wants to a last opportunity to answer one of these three questions. How does this topic change culture? How or what might the department do to implement this topic? And what sources or experts do we need to bring to the table to present? Any one of the three. If you don't quite see your notes up here, this meeting is recorded and I will be going over it again. So.
Oh, can I just address the what I have said up there?
All
it is-
department members,
Thank you,
yes.
thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, done. And by the way, I was talking about this Stone Turn group that's out here looking at the complaint about the disparate treatment of African-American OPD officers, et cetera, and Latino officers. Jack Donahue and Linda Mamara are from New York City. And I ain't got a problem with New York City, but I mean, like, we don't have brilliance right out here in the Bay Area. I mean, we got Linda, we got, Eberhard Steady, we got Lieutenant B. Hubbard. He could have done some of this work. I'm saying, no offense, guys, but why do we need you? You come out here and you don't know what we're doing. We have to educate you and pay you too. So that makes me think, do they really want to change? Or they just want to do the, just set the table, but really not put any food down. Make the table look all nice. But there's no food in the dishes. That's what I'm thinking. Because we keep saying the same thing over and over and over and over. And you're not getting any change.
That is a much larger conversation than and above my pay grade.
Okay.
Than what we have here.
It needs to be said here because we're not naive to it. Somebody reviews what we've done here on this ad hoc committee. I want them to know that we tried to put our finger on the pulse of the issue, what really matters. We weren't just doing, dancing around the issue. We're really trying to talk about the things that are pertinent.
I agree. Thank you. Jose.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any direct connection with this, but I've probably mentioned to any number of you the study that was done by David Muhammad and ex-DC Chris Bolton around the 911 calls. Yeah, it just seems to me that there may be some insight that they've come to, insights that they've come to as a result of their study that relate to, that may relate to discipline, the discipline matrix and any sort of modifications, especially given, former DC Bolton's background. It's just something I want to throw out. Again, I don't know if there's any, there could be any real connection, but they did a great deal of work around in that study. And they may well be experts coming from two different directions, but finding some common ground that may relate directly to the discipline matrix and what we're talking about. It may be well worth exploring. I want to throw that out. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you all. Given us a lot to think about and a lot to grapple with. Oh, Mariano.
Yeah, thank you. It really doesn't have anything with these three questions. Well, maybe it does, but I'm just having a hard time grappling with two commissioners on this ad hoc. I think ultimately it's the commissioners who are going to take and make the decision of what gets put forth and what gets reported to the court and to the monitor. And so it just doesn't sit well with me having two commissioners and not having a tiebreaker. I think that, that's why there's been, three commissioners in ad hocs. That's one point. Then the other, I just read today in the Oakland site that Fire Chief Armstrong is filing some kind of claim in the court, and that may lead to a lawsuit. And then at the bottom of the article, it stated that Chair Malele is claiming the same thing in her lawsuit. And that again, and I'm raising this, in an honest and transparent way. I'm having a little difficult time grappling with if Chair Malele is claiming similar things that there's the monitor is there to make money, and wants to keep the NSA in place, and there's the fact that there's non-compliance, is all kind of false crises. Then it seems to me, that there's a conflict of interest there, and so I'm thinking, if and I just read this today on the Oakland site, so I'm thinking, should Chair Malele recuse herself from this ad hoc? So those are my 2 points that I'm really grappling with here, and it's just not. I'm not feeling good about it. Thank you.
I appreciate you bringing those up. We had 3 commissioners until unfortunately one was excused. We haven't had an opportunity to appoint a third to the ad hoc. I don't know what the plans are for that. And right now, I think that it is something that we could talk about, but not in this ad hoc, but I think with the chair about having more help. But at the same time, I want to address the second point, which is I think that between Commissioner Chair Malele and I, we are honestly and faithfully trying to bring these topics, to have discussions, to bring our best foot forward about these topics with as much community input as possible. And I certainly think that if we're at a situation where there might be a recusal, well, I would have a lot of problems being able to get stuff done and by myself. Chair Malele does a lot of work. She has the interests of Oakland at heart. I know that you may disagree and others may disagree, but she does invaluable work. And I don't think that this ad hoc would be able to move forward in the middle of this series of meetings. I get where you're coming from. I don't necessarily share those opinions. It's something that you and I, or others can talk about. But at the moment, I think we got to keep moving forward. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you bringing it up. And I know that must be tough to do so, especially with Chair Malele right here on the call.
Yeah, and I can offer that mine and his are public, so you could read those and then you could determine actual facts about what overlap exists there.
Well, I'm concerned about what is going to be reported to Judge Orrick, and who does the reporting out, and how do we decide on it? Because we haven't made any decisions on anything. We just talking. And I'm hoping that if knowing what I know, what I've expressed in this group about the Oakland Police Department has a unique ability to dismiss any critique that comes its way. Is this ad hoc committee dismissing some of the critiques, or will dismiss the critiques that is coming this way? And will they report out, or is it going to be a reporting out where we all get to look at what's being reported and said? Will there be a potential for a minority report? Because last week, it was a surprise question. How does everybody feel about, ending the consent decree? And everybody said hopeful. And I feel
No,
skeptical.
that's not what it said. The question said, how do people feel about OPD's ability to get compliance with task 5?
What is task 5?
IAD,
That's the crux of our issue.
which is why I put the question.
But the crux of our issue is, OPD being held accountable. The compartment of law enforcement departments that does that is IAD, Internal Affairs.
I'm going to take a moment, since we have 3 minutes left, to answer your question and also to introduce our next topic, since we only have those 3 minutes to do, and I'm trying to keep us on time. My plan is to take everything that's being said over the course of these weeks with sources, with reviewing recordings, and to bring back to this particular ad hoc a written statement of what those recommendations might be and how OPT might implement them for you to review. And that's why we're having both meetings on every Monday, all the way up to the first, except for the Labor Day Monday, and then coming back to go over those again on September 7th. I understand where you are coming from. I understand that sometimes it is a surprise, but we are trying to log everything and record everything so that it's extremely accurate about what was being said, what was being asked, and where people are at. I generally will give people an opportunity, or at least have some line or have a discussion about something that was not reached consensus on, and can talk about it. At the moment, I'm going to lead us towards wrapping up and saying that our next topic is the discussion topic number 3 that I know is something that we have touched upon through each one of these ad hoc, each one of these meetings last week and this week. And I hope that we could have a real focused discussion on this next topic, which is ethical leadership and management for low to mid-level managers. focusing specifically on sergeants, lieutenants, captains, right? Maybe not so high. I'll have a discussion about what is low to mid-level managers. Lieutenant Herbert, I want to thank you for sending in that email some of the materials. Let's take the time to have that discussion, and if I have some time, I will try to bring back some initial drafts of what was discussed in the first and second meeting, and some steps forward and that next meeting. I don't know how my next week goes, but I'll try to build in time as I can. Our next meeting is Monday, August 21st. It is at 6 p.m. It is via Zoom. If anybody wants to chat or have further conversation, I am available. Most of you know my cell phone. Feel free to call or discuss, or
I will be calling you.
I know. And I look forward to it. Questions, thoughts? Thank you to everyone. Thank you for everyone for taking the time. Seriously, everyone. Buenas noches. Good night. Did I say that right? No.
Much as you said it right.
Okay. Was it the right phrase?
You did it well.
Good night.
Good
Thank
night.
you, everyone.
Good evening, folks.
Already getting called. Good night.
Lieutenant Kalan,
Yes, ma'am.
the reason why I asked on the website whether
This is Jesse.
there's been critiques by members of the public around certain policies and procedures, not all website available. So especially if we're going to address discipline, I want to make sure we got full coverage on it. So yeah, feel free to email me to confirm that, but more importantly, maybe report back to the group on that.
Okay. So I saw Nikki posted a link to some of the policies. Is that
Yeah, it's the one that you showed, the
VT?
yeah.
Yeah.
And, because, there's been critiques. I particularly one member of the public who comes to the commission and often says that there are policies, procedures, what have you, that OPD that's not on the website. And so she's been insisting on an account of all them that are not on the website. But minimally, at least for this situation, since we're going to be addressing discipline and making reference to it, we don't want to make reference to it because it was dug in a court monitor report, right? We want to know the website.
Okay, I will double check. I think there's somebody that's in charge of what's get posted to the website versus what's internal.
Yeah.
But I'll figure out who sorts that out and just make sure we're up to date.
You got a couple weeks or so to figure that out. Have a good one.
Thank you too.
Bye.